What I'm about to tell you is going to change the way you think about belly fat forever, because the most dangerous fat in your body is not the fat you can grab with your fingers. It's the fat you can't see, the fat wrapped deep around your liver, pancreas, and intestines right now. Quietly driving blood sugar up, blood pressure higher, inflammation deeper, and energy lower. And when I reveal the fastest science-backed way to shrink it, you're going to understand why so many seniors spend years doing sit-ups, cutting random foods, and walking in circles without ever touching the real problem. I'm Dr. Michael Joel, and today could be the day your metabolism finally starts working for you again. Before we begin, please subscribe and join our community, because these videos can protect your health, independence, confidence, and peace. Now let me say something that may surprise you, and I need you to hear it clearly. Visceral fat is not just a cosmetic issue. This is not about looking slimmer at a family reunion in Ohio, or fitting into the same jeans you wore to your granddaughter's college graduation in Texas. This is about whether your organs are being compressed, irritated, and hormonally disrupted every single day. I have seen seniors improve their blood sugar, lower triglycerides, reduce fatty liver, and regain stamina, not because they found a miracle supplement, but because they finally targeted the right fat the right way. Let me tell you about Walter from Phoenix, Arizona, because his story explains why this matters. Walter was 72. A retired firefighter, broad shoulders, sturdy legs, still mowing his own lawn, still driving himself to Home Depot, still convinced he was doing fine because the scale hadn't changed much in years, but his waist kept growing. His fasting glucose crept upward. His doctor mentioned fatty liver. He was exhausted after lunch, snored louder than ever, and felt like his body had become heavy from the inside. Walter thought he just needed more crunches. He bought an ab roller, started doing floor exercises, and nothing changed. Because the fat making him sick wasn't sitting on top of his stomach. It was packed behind it. And that brings us to the first truth almost nobody explains properly. Visceral fat behaves differently than the soft fat under the skin. It is more metabolically active, more inflammatory, and, more closely linked to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke risk, fatty liver, and loss of physical function as we age. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. And this is where hope enters the picture. Visceral fat also tends to respond faster when you do the right things. Not foolish things, not extreme things, the right things. Which means, if you've been frustrated because your stomach feels harder, rounder, or more swollen over the years, you are not stuck. But you do need a strategy that matches biology, not marketing. Now here is where most people go wrong. And it costs them months or even years. They attack visceral fat with effort, but not with leverage. They try spot reduction. They buy belly-blasting gadgets. They sweat through exhausting routines they can't maintain. They skip meals all day, then overeat at night. They focus on the scale when the real clue is the waistline. And because they don't understand what visceral fat responds to fastest, they end up burning out before their body ever gets the message. The fastest way to shrink visceral fat is not AB exercises. It is not detox tea. It is not starving yourself. It is creating a consistent calorie shortfall while protecting muscle and forcing your body to become metabolically expensive to store fat around the organs. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before I show you the full protocol, you need to understand the one reason this works so powerfully after 60. As we get older, we naturally lose muscle if we don't actively defend it. And when muscle shrinks, your body becomes less efficient at handling carbohydrates, less efficient at burning calories, and more likely to store extra energy right where you don't want it, in the abdomen. This is why two people can weigh the same, and one looks relatively lean while the other carries a hard forward belly and feels tired all the time. The issue is not just body weight. It is where your body is storing energy and whether your metabolism has enough muscle tissue to keep up. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. Carol from Columbus, Ohio, was 69, a retired school secretary, and she swore she barely ate anything. Coffee in the morning, a muffin from a local grocery store, maybe half a sandwich at noon. Then by dinner she was so hungry she'd eat crackers while cooking, have pasta, garlic bread, a glass of wine, and ice cream in front of the television. Almost every night. She truly felt she was eating light all day. But what her body experienced was a blood sugar roller coaster, followed by nighttime overfeeding. Her waist was growing, her sleep was poor, and her afternoon energy crashed. She didn't need more willpower. She needed a different daily rhythm. So here is the first pillar of the fastest plan. Stop feeding visceral fat with constant processed carbohydrates and liquid calories. I'm not telling you that you can never enjoy a slice of apple pie in Michigan at Thanksgiving or a burger at a summer cookout in Florida. But if most of your calories come from pastries, chips, sweetened coffee drinks, white bread, soda, fruit juice, and late-night snack foods, visceral fat has a steady supply line. The body stores excess energy where it can, and in many older adults that means deep in the abdomen. The fastest improvement usually starts when breakfast, lunch, and dinner begin with real protein and fiber, not sugar and starch alone. That single change lowers hunger, steadies blood sugar, and makes overeating less automatic. Now listen carefully, because this is the part that surprises almost everyone. The fastest food move for shrinking visceral fat is often not eat less, even though total intake matters. It's eat smarter first, build each meal around protein, then add fiber, then add a sensible portion of starch if you want it. That means eggs with vegetables instead of toast and jam alone, chicken and beans on a salad instead of crackers and cheese, salmon with broccoli and a baked potato instead of a giant bowl of pasta with garlic bread. When protein comes first, you hold muscle better. When fiber rises, you stay full longer. And when your meals become harder to overeat, the calorie deficit begins quietly, without panic, and without the rebound binge that ruins progress. But food is only half of the answer, and this is where the science gets exciting. Exercise is not just a way to burn calories. When done correctly, it directly pressures visceral fat. In study after study, moderate to vigorous aerobic activity reduces deep abdominal fat, and combination programs that pair aerobic exercise with resistance training work especially well in older adults. Translation: your body responds fastest when you walk briskly enough to raise your heart rate, and you also give your muscles a reason to stay alive. If you diet without movement, you lose some fat, yes, but you also risk losing muscle. If you move without improving food quality, you help, but often not enough. Put the two together, and that's where the acceleration happens. Let me tell you about James from Tampa, Florida, because he stumbled onto one of the most underrated tricks in this entire discussion. James was 74, former insurance salesman, and after dinner he had a habit of dropping into his recliner, turning on the baseball game, and staying there until bedtime. His blood sugar was borderline high, his waist kept expanding, and he felt sleepy after meals. His daughter finally convinced him to start walking around the neighborhood for 15 minutes after dinner. Not power walking, not jogging, just a steady, purposeful walk. 2 weeks later, he noticed he felt less stuffed at night. A month later, his belt loosened. Over time, he added a second short walk after lunch. That tiny routine did more for his belly than years of occasional weekend exercise. Why does that work? Because walking after meals helps your muscles pull glucose out of the bloodstream when it would otherwise be more likely to stay elevated, pushing your body towards storage. For seniors especially, post-meal walking is a secret weapon because it's gentle, repeatable, joint-friendly, and easy to attach to routines that already exist. You don't need a gym membership in Los Angeles or fancy shoes from some boutique store in Manhattan. You need consistency. 10 to 15 minutes after lunch and dinner can be transformative when combined with better meals. And here's what matters most: not heroic effort, but frequency. The body responds to repeated metabolic signals. Every meal is a chance to tell your system, use this energy now, don't store it around my organs. Now we have to talk about the mistake that causes so many seniors to fail, even when they're working out. They only do cardio, and they do it in a way that slowly costs them muscle. After 60, muscle is your insurance policy. It protects your balance, your independence, your insulin sensitivity, and your ability to keep fat off your midsection. If all you do is walk very slowly and cut calories aggressively, you may lose weight on paper while your body becomes weaker and softer underneath. That is not the victory we want. The science-backed faster route is to pair walking with simple strength work 2 or 3 times a week. Chair squats, wall push-ups, resistance bands, light dumbbells, sit-to-stands from the couch, safe, boring, effective movements. And please don't underestimate how powerful that is, because people hear strength training and imagine loud gyms, heavy barbells, or 25-year-olds filming themselves in mirrors. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about telling your body, this muscle is still needed. When you send that message consistently, your metabolism becomes harder to slow down. You preserve the tissue that burns through fuel better. You improve how your body responds to insulin. You make it less likely that every dietary slip gets stored in the abdomen. In plain English, muscle makes visceral fat harder to keep. That is why the fastest plan is not starvation. It is a muscle-protective fat loss plan. That distinction changes everything for seniors trying to lose the right kind of weight. Now, let me show you the second accelerator. And this one is far more important than most people realize: sleep. There are people right now trying to outwalk a body that is being sabotaged every night by too little sleep. When sleep gets cut short, appetite often rises, cravings rise, judgment worsens, and the body becomes more likely to deposit fat in the abdomen. That means you can be eating only a little more, the scale may barely move, and yet the dangerous fat around the organs keeps building. This is why some seniors say, "Doctor, I'm not gaining that much, but my stomach feels bigger and harder." The body is changing distribution, not just total weight, and poor sleep quietly pushes that change in the wrong direction. I saw this with Linda from Nashville, Tennessee. She was 67, caring for her husband, waking up several times a night, surviving on caffeine and nerves, and constantly frustrated that her waist kept growing, even though she swore she wasn't eating that much. She started each morning tired, grabbed a sweet coffee and a pastry, skipped proper meals, then picked at snack foods all afternoon. The fix was not perfection. It was protecting sleep where she could, reducing late caffeine, eating more structured meals, getting daylight early, and walking after dinner instead of staying on her phone. When her sleep improved even modestly, her hunger improved. When her hunger improved, her choices improved. When her choices improved, her belly began to change. Metabolism is connected. Nothing happens in isolation. And that leads us to alcohol. Because this is where many hard bellies hide in plain sight. A lot of people think, it's only 2 glasses of wine, or it's just a couple beers while watching the game. But alcohol adds calories, lowers food judgment, stirs appetite, disrupts sleep, and gives the liver extra work, so fat burning gets crowded out. For many older adults, the evening drink is not just a drink. It's a trigger for pretzels, ice cream, poor sleep, and next-day cravings. If your goal is the fastest reduction in visceral fat, cutting back on alcohol is one of the quickest wins available. Not glamorous, not exciting, but clinically powerful. Sometimes the belly starts shrinking not when a new superfood is added, but when one repeated evening habit is removed. Now, I want to address fasting, because I know some of you are hearing about it everywhere. Can time-restricted eating help some people reduce visceral fat? Yes, it can, but only if it helps you eat less overall without triggering rebound overeating, weakness, or medication problems. For seniors, the danger is doing fasting in a way that leads to muscle loss, dizziness, or late-night overeating. So if you use meal timing, keep it sane. A simple 12-hour overnight break from dinner to breakfast is a reasonable starting place for many people. Finish dinner earlier. Stop random nighttime snacking. Let insulin come down for longer overnight. But do not turn this into punishment. The fastest plan is the one your body can tolerate and your life can sustain. Let me tell you the biggest myth in this whole subject, because it keeps people trapped. The myth is that visceral fat melts only through hard, punishing exercise. That is false. What visceral fat responds to fastest is repeated metabolic pressure, not suffering. Brisk walking most days, short walks after meals, protein-forward meals, fewer ultra-processed foods, lower alcohol, better sleep, 2 or 3 strength sessions a week, a modest calorie deficit that does not crush your energy. When you stack these together, the body begins to draw from visceral fat because it is highly active tissue. And that means you do not need to feel the burn in your abs for this to work. In fact, ab soreness is irrelevant. The signal comes from the whole system. So what is the fastest way to shrink visceral fat backed by science? Here it is, plain and simple. Combine a moderate calorie deficit with daily brisk walking, especially after meals, and resistance training 2 to 3 times a week while prioritizing protein, fiber, sleep, and lower alcohol. That's the answer. And I want to say it again because people always try to replace it with something flashier. Not a cleanse, not spot reduction, not a supplement with a dramatic label. The fastest path is a combined strategy that makes your body use more energy, store less energy, and keep the muscle that protects your metabolism. Diet alone can help. Exercise alone can help. But together, especially in older adults, they work better. That is where the real change begins. Now I'm going to make this practical, because information only matters if you can use it tomorrow morning. Here is a simple 30-day visceral fat protocol for a senior in the United States who wants a realistic start. First, eat 3 structured meals most days and stop grazing between them. Second, build every meal around a protein source: eggs, plain yogurt, cottage cheese, chicken, turkey, tuna, salmon, beans, or tofu if you like it. Third, add a high-fiber side: vegetables, berries, apples, beans, or oatmeal. Fourth, replace sweet drinks with water, unsweet tea, or black coffee if caffeine doesn't disturb your sleep. Fifth, walk for 10 to 15 minutes after lunch or dinner, and ideally both. That alone can change the week. Then add this, because this is where momentum turns into results. On 3 days each week, do 20 minutes of strength work at home. Sit down and stand up from a sturdy chair 10 times. Rest, repeat. Do wall push-ups. Use resistance bands for rows. Hold light dumbbells for overhead presses if your shoulders tolerate them. March in place while holding the kitchen counter. Heel raises, step-ups on a low stair if safe. That's enough to begin. And on most days, aim for 1 longer walk at a pace that makes conversation possible, but not effortless. You should feel like you are working a little, not gasping, not suffering, just moving with purpose. Your body does not need punishment. It needs signals repeated often enough to trust them. Now, here is what you should expect. Because unrealistic expectations make people quit too early. In the beginning, the scale may not tell the full story. Your first signs are often less bloating, better appetite control, lower afternoon sleepiness, looser waistbands, better fasting glucose, and a stomach that feels less hard. That matters. Visceral fat reduction often shows up in waist circumference and energy before it shows up dramatically on the scale. So measure your waist at the level of your navel once a week. Don't suck in your stomach. Don't measure after a huge meal. Same day, same time, same tape. If your waist is trending down, your internal health is likely moving in the right direction even before the mirror fully catches up. And please hear me on this point, because it may save you from making a serious mistake. If you have diabetes, use insulin. take medications that can drop blood sugar, have significant kidney disease, unexplained weight loss, severe frailty, or major heart symptoms, do not launch into aggressive dieting on your own. Get medical guidance. The goal here is not to make you weaker. It is to make you safer and stronger while reducing dangerous fat. I've seen seniors transform beautifully with a thoughtful plan, but I've also seen people chase internet advice until they end up lightheaded, under-muscled, and miserable. Science-backed does not mean reckless. It means targeted, measured, and appropriate for your real health situation, not somebody else's before and after photo online. Let me tell you about Frank from Des Moines, Iowa, because his story pulls everything together. Frank was 76, loved late-night television, bourbon on weekends, and toast for breakfast every morning. And he kept telling me he was too old for all that fitness stuff. His waist was over 40 inches, his triglycerides were high, and he got winded carrying groceries from the garage. We didn't turn him into a marathon runner. We changed breakfast to eggs and fruit. We replaced the nightly chips with popcorn or nothing at all. He walked 12 minutes after dinner. He did chair squats and band rows in his den. He cut alcohol to 1 night a week. 12 weeks later, his waist was down, energy was up, and his lab work improved. No magic, just leverage. That is what I want for you. Not just a flatter stomach, but a body that feels more trustworthy again. Because that's what so many seniors are really asking for. They want to stand up without strain. They want to play with grandchildren in North Carolina, or go fishing in Minnesota, or walk through the grocery store without feeling heavy, breathless, and discouraged. Visceral fat steals more than appearance. It steals ease. It steals confidence. It makes normal life feel harder than it should. And when that hard, forward belly starts shrinking, people often notice something beautiful. They don't just look different, they feel like themselves again, lighter, sharper, more willing to go places and do things they had quietly started avoiding. So let me summarize the truth as clearly as I can, because I never want this to get lost in noise. The fastest way to shrink visceral fat is not one isolated trick. It is one combined strategy. Eat in a way that creates a manageable calorie deficit, protect muscle with adequate protein and simple strength training, and use regular walking, especially after meals, to drive fuel into muscle instead of storage. Support that with better sleep and less alcohol, and visceral fat becomes far easier for your body to give up. That is the science-backed path. It is not dramatic enough for marketers, but it is effective enough to change lives. And at your age, effectiveness matters a lot more than entertainment.